Hey Ed, you're right, man. Just a quick one. I'm just going through the inquiries, and I just noticed someone on there asking about our UnRAID versus TrueNAS comparison video. Yeah, he's just asking about where to find it. No, like UnRAID and TrueNAS, like a video comparison we did on those. What do you mean we never done a comparison? That would be weird. Imagine running a NAS YouTube channel for as many years as we have, and not actually taking the time to make a comparison of arguably two of the biggest names in the world of network attached storage. I mean, imagine being at a YouTube channel that just hit 200,000 subscribers with over 60 million views and never have compared two of the largest names in the world of network attached storage. What kind of Mickey Mouse BS is that? Look, I'll be straight with you. When me and Eddie started NAS Compares, we did this because we looked at the entire market of network storage and gone, it is too complicated. And the years that we spent working in retail in data storage, it became very, very apparent to us that there just wasn't a smooth on-ramp for a lot of users onto private data ownership. And they were being forced, hand-strung in many ways, to go straight to the cloud. And we didn't like that, and that's why we built this. Now, fast forward to now. Although turnkey NAS solutions, Synology, QNAP, Aoostar, Terramaster, UGREEN, to name but a few, have done a great job in providing turnkey NAS solutions out the gate. Many of you, for cost or simply to want to be able to do more with your data, have started looking at giants like TrueNAS and UnRAID to take the next step. Now, I have always been intimidated by comparing these two directly, largely because, frankly, better platforms online have done this job. TechnoTim, Lawrence Systems, Craft Computing, to name but a few. But no one, I think, has ever approached this subject on behalf of those living on turnkey that now want to take a footstep out of it. And that's what this video is about. Today we are comparing TrueNAS and UnRAID, but we are doing it on behalf of those of you that are in locked turnkey NAS platforms that want to know that when they take this step, there will be another step on the ladder that they can use. So let's crack on and start this comparison. Also, if you're in a bit of a rush, I don't know, you got a bus to catch or something, the TLDR, TrueNAS is better at scale. Nice and simple, it is about that larger scale capability. Not only because of the incremental implementations throughout the entire build structure of everything from the datasets right the way down to little bells and whistles on every app, I hate seagulls, but when it compares against UnRAID, UnRAID is so much better on the smaller scale moving out. So if you are a turnkey NAS user moving away from larger 2, 3, 4U rack mounts with a turnkey NAS provider, you will almost certainly have a better experience, especially if you have a sysadmin in place moving towards TrueNAS there. But however, if you are moving from a slightly smaller scale environment, I will say that UnRAID will almost certainly be the better on-ramp for you. Again, huge oversimplification. This is a TLDR. Let's crack on with the actual comparison. First up, let's actually talk about initialization between both platforms, because if you are moving away from turnkey, one of the things you probably liked about that was, and the clue's in the title, turnkey. You turn it on, it works. Now, with TrueNAS and UnRAID, I would argue right now that between the two of them, UnRAID has a so much smoother on-ramp. Let me explain. With TrueNAS, it is like installing an OS on a brand new Windows PC, if you like. You have to go ahead and download an ISO image from TrueNAS's website. You then have to use a boot image USB creator tool, such as Rufus or Blanche Etcher. From there, it'll allow you to then KVM into the device. You'll be using an IP KVM, which is a simple keyboard, mouse, monitor attached onto it there, and to go through the installation process to create a boot drive. Again, none of that includes creating the RAID environment either, unlike when you use a turnkey NAS solution where that all takes place during the initialization. From there, you will then boot it up, it will then reboot, remove the USB key, and then you can start playing with the system proper. With UnRAID, you create the USB boot drive directly from within the same system that you downloaded the image. UnRAID has a USB creator tool, and once you create that USB drive, you can insert it inside your NAS system of choice, and from there, as long as you've set it so that it reads the USB drive before the boot drive there at the beginning, or you go into BIOS, which again would require KVM to access it, the result would be that it is far, far faster to configure UnRAID and get straight into the desktop environment than it is on TrueNAS there. Now, there's going to be some of you out there that maybe are not aware of like change of environment within UnRAID to do with the boot environment. One of the biggest advantages and arguably disadvantages of UnRAID that many people have talked about is the fact that when you do use UnRAID, it boots from a USB. It actually loads it into the memory. Oversimplification, but stick with me. And whereas TrueNAS utilizes a traditional operating system drive, typically an SSD, and then everything else is running from it on the disks that you attach to it. However, it has changed. Previously, UnRAID, when it did that, although it was very lightweight and allowed a real reduction in the amount of system overhead, it did mean if you lost that USB drive, you were knackered. And given the key was attached to the USB drive, even worse. But now you can install not only the UnRAID installation onto an M.2 NVMe inside, just like any other NAS operating system or operating system in general, but also they take advantage of something called TPM, Trusted Platform Module, and that allows you to have it attached to the machine rather than the USB. And then from that, you can also set up RAID environments within that drive for recovery as well. So that has been a change that has been applied in UnRAID there, but it has meant a slightly more complicated installation there, and therefore has leveled the playing field against the advantages it may once have had against TrueNAS. What about the day-to-day use of these platforms? When you are accessing it via a desktop environment there, and again, you can access it via a mobile, and the user interfaces will scale up and down. That is another change that has happened in UnRAID, although it has always been available in TrueNAS there. But if you are accessing both of these servers, you can see there side by side on the screen. I will say, and again, I'm trying to look at this with fresh eyes, TrueNAS just has always looked a little bit more complicated for me. Now, again, that's fine when you know what you are doing, and over the years I've learned a great deal more about the user interface of TrueNAS and can understand its layout, why certain options are built into it, whether it is that you're building your storage area, your data sets, your VDEVs, etc., and building up your cache, or that you are simply setting up users and different applications and services. It makes a lot more sense now, that level of configuration and control. However, if you are coming from a turnkey NAS environment, that can be incredibly intimidating. Whereas in the UnRAID side of things, I'm by no means going to say it's as straightforward as using a Synology NAS or something like that. Certainly, creating the storage area on it does have its own little bells and whistles and difficulties, but it is definitely a little bit easier, I would argue, than it is on TrueNAS there. And although a lot of the configuration and hardware options are there, they're not top level. So if what you're looking for is complexity out the gate, or at the very least, to be able to tweak the perfect storage out the gate, TrueNAS almost certainly is going to be a more appealing option to you, as every single layer of the creation operation is given to you right at the start, whereas UnRAID actually opens in basic mode and then you can extend it out, or after the fact configure some elements. Another thing worth highlighting that has changed in recent years is the file systems. And although both of these platforms support multiple file systems, TrueNAS, or TrueNAS Community Edition is what we're looking at here, that generally focuses almost exclusively on ZFS, with support of other file systems, with a few, little works in the background there. It doesn't work at its best unless you are using the Zettabyte file system there. Whereas UnRAID supports UnRAID, it supports BTRFS, it even supports XFS and stuff like that. It allows a great deal of configuration there in terms of the storage capabilities. And again, if you are using NAS, turnkey NAS software in the last few years, you may have noticed that things like Synology and Aoostar and UGREEN and Terramaster have all pretty much committed to the BTRFS side of things, where like QNAP has really committed to the ZFS side of things. They both have their own advantages in terms of system resource utilization, the rapidity of snapshots there, RAID parity, the volume requirements and stuff like that. So generally, I would say if you're already used to using BTRFS and you enjoyed that responsiveness there, maybe the file self-healing, if you have ever noticed that happening, you're probably going to enjoy some of the configuration of those options in UnRAID. You don't lose them in TrueNAS. Certainly, they are there, and I would argue, if you tweak the system, are significantly better. But bear in mind, with TrueNAS, it will require a bit of extra work, or at the very least, an AI agent or LLM holding your hand throughout the process. That extends, by the way, to something simple like creating a share. When you do want to create an area of shared storage, just simply either Samba, SMB, or something a little bit more complicated, I would say that on the TrueNAS side of things, the capabilities to scale out is just much better with native iSCSI support as well. Creating a share is a great deal more customizable and configurable on TrueNAS. But with that requires all manner of settings, services and configuration that you may or may not get wrong, some of which, by the way, cannot be reversed. Whereas on the UnRAID side of things, it's a great deal more simple. Again, nowhere near as simple as turnkey, but at the same time, it's more simple to set those up, those shares a great deal more easily. But keep in mind that some of the extra bells and whistles, not just iSCSI, will require additional community apps to get the job done currently. But what about when something goes wrong? What about monitoring these systems? They might be on 24/7, but the hope is that you're barely accessing them more than 1% of the time. 1% even then sounds a lot. I would argue TrueNAS has a great deal of alert customization and configuration and ways in which you can be informed about the status of the system, good, bad, or anything in the middle. Whereas in UnRAID, the configuration, a lot of those alerts, again, notwithstanding using some community applications, isn't quite as diverse as it is on TrueNAS. But I would argue interpreting alerts, interpreting information and issues is easier on UnRAID. But again, you'd have to be looking for it in the first place. So depending on your level of proactivity, or if you do have a sysadmin in place, which again, I think a lot of you watching this, if you're coming from Turkey, you are the sysadmin, your level of mileage on either of these platforms when it comes to managing alerts and proactively acting on alerts is going to differ quite wildly. Another thing worth highlighting is to do with that architecture. Even though, as I mentioned earlier on, that UnRAID no longer has to run just from an M.2 NVMe, from a USB, and can now run from an M.2 NVMe, etc. inside the system. If you do have a crash, because of the architecture of TrueNAS by default being that OS drive, you will generally find that the alerts in the logs and things that have gone wrong up to the moment of a crash will be a great deal more detailed than they will be on UnRAID, unless you enable log recordings, which will take up space, which again, moving away from the USB would probably be important, or you've moved on to the M.2 internally. And given that the majority of UnRAID users still rely on the USB architecture to date, it means that a lot of users who are going for that platform, because of that lightweight deployment requirement, may never know that if they do have a crash, the crucial thing that triggered the crash, which can be instantaneous, may never show on the logs. So again, if you are going down the UnRAID route, even though USB deployment is an option and is arguably the more desirable option for many, I would still say to make the most of it, at least in terms of troubleshooting and management, go down the locally deployed OS drive route. One of the earliest pain points, and by pain point I mean absolute agony sometimes, that users that have been living on turnkey NAS solutions, Synology, QNAP, etc., and then moving over to TrueNAS or UnRAID have suffered. The earliest one is creating areas of storage, and we will get onto installing applications as well. When it comes to turnkey NAS solutions, you can generally create your areas of storage and even have an installation of something like Plex or Jellyfin all put together in less than 5 minutes, completely hassle-free, thanks to the wizards that are included in those platforms. Now, with TrueNAS and UnRAID, it won't come as a big surprise. Creating your area of storage on TrueNAS is just more complicated. You have to go ahead and create your ZFS pool, your data set, your app pool, your host path, your ACL permissions, setting up the Docker installation there and all the little bits and bobs and the directories that it can access. And it is not presented in a very user-friendly fashion. And if you're going to argue with me about that, try and use one of the online demos for Synology, QNAP, UGREEN, etc. online. See how they do it, and you'll see what I mean by complicated versus not. Now, UnRAID is also complicated, but it's not quite as complicated there. And they are working on wizards, one of which I was utilizing on the X15 45 drives UnRAID collaboration system, and I'm not going to be surprised if any of the work that's gone into those wizards will eventually make its way onto the rest of UnRAID in the very near future. But it's still not as easy as turnkey. Either one of these, this isn't really something you're going to be doing regularly. So as long as you're prepared to put the hours in, either one of these should be absolutely fine for your storage creation. But bear in mind, when it comes to intimidation, when it comes to the potential for getting stuff wrong, TrueNAS is certainly going to be the more complicated. Doesn't make it worse. If anything, it makes it significantly better in terms of efficiency and optimization. But UnRAID is the easier stepping stone into creating that storage. And that also extends to installing the applications and services. Because if you do want to install something like Plex, again, or Jellyfin on a TrueNAS server, there are so many things that you could have done wrong prior to that, but also the layers of access and control that have to be given to different app users, app databases, and the media shares that you have got in place that if you get wrong can be really annoying, or at the very least inefficient as all hell. Whereas on UnRAID there, the pathway is a little more simplified alongside curated community applications in the App Center there. But again, if you're looking for an experience that is identical to just go to the App Center and click download, as you find in your turnkey NAS, neither one of these are going to offer you that. The closest you'll get is UnRAID, but even then, I wouldn't trust a one-click install of Plex on UnRAID without going into the back end and really checking some of those directories, especially when it comes to transcoding and taking advantage of integrated graphics or a GPU. In short, TrueNAS provides a greater degree of control and separation between every single layer of the system, which in terms of security is 10 out of 10. But UnRAID allows you to do it a great deal more simple out the gate, and then afterwards reverse engineer and reinstate a lot of those securities afterwards. So it really comes down to where your learning curve is going to be best placed for you. Now, had I made this video a few years ago, it would have been very easy for me to highlight the very conscious difference that TrueNAS, with its heavy emphasis on ZFS, provides a lot of the native inline benefits of ZFS. Everything from inline benefits of compaction, deduplication and compression, all the way through to the data integrity checks, snapshot retooling, resilvering, and ultimately having a singular disk management and data management ecosystem all rolled into one within the OS and the storage running parallel at all times. However, in 2026, UnRAID does have that advantage, as mentioned, of support of ZFS or ZFS if you're from the side of the pond that eats fries and not chips. But it doesn't do it as OS-wide or as natively as TrueNAS. The reality is, if one of the chief selling points beyond pricing was the draw of ZFS, I would argue you're going to have a better experience with that on TrueNAS. It's native from the ground up and developed largely in parallel with every single feature and service within that platform. Because UnRAID has integrated it almost by proxy within its storage manager in recent years, it isn't truly native throughout the entire appliance. And although you can take advantage of a number of those benefits within the storage pools that you create, I would never say that it is native to the entire UnRAID experience, and therefore some of the benefits and the line between when the OS is doing something and when the storage is doing something are a little bit more blurred than the complete uniform but still parallel running experience of TrueNAS. Now, we will get onto the subject of pricing and value shortly, because frankly that is an enormous difference between these two for many. But before we get to that, I want to talk about support, because that does form a big part of that. A number of you that have come from Turnkey NAS have done so because you felt like you were paying for a Turnkey NAS solution and you had a means to get support directly from them. And even if the public or community support couldn't get you over the line from that as a commercial product, you did have the feeling, and in many cases you actually physically did have the ability to contact software support with lifetime support licenses from Turnkey NAS solutions to get things over the line, and in some cases allow them to remote access your system from their side with sufficient authentication and security protocol to fix problems for you on the command line level. Now, that is available on TrueNAS and UnRAID there. They both have paid level access platforms there where you can contact an expert within these fields of their respective NAS operating systems to help you get it over the line. But I would argue in the case of both of them, the primary area of support is going to be coming down to their communities. And I just can't tell you one is better than the other. Prior to making this video, I decided to run, and you can probably think it's mean-spirited, I had no ill intent in mind. I went to both of their respective community forums, and the primary forums, as a brand new user, put a post on there. I was new, I was a Windows user, I didn't know what I was doing, I got the hardware, it was an Aoostar with a bunch of drives, 4 SSDs, I had to do some editing, I had a few little team members, I put a whole post together, and I was really hoping that when I put that post on both of their respective forums, there would be some level of distinction between them where it would act as a test case scenario where I could point at either of them and say that one of them was by margins better or worse than the other. The reality was they were both brilliant. If you can see that, and again, I'm hopefully going to put a post before the video goes out there apologising to the people on those respective discussion threads. But both of them not only replied promptly within 24 hours, with multiple users offering guidance on drive selection, RAM, cache pinning, applications and services and tools that you should use. And this was all users doing it off their own back. So I'll say right now, if you are a Turnkey NAS user, feel confident that the community will have your back, because that was a great, perfect test case scenario of some knobber on the internet appearing on their forum going, I don't know what to do, help my hand. And it would have been so easy for them to just put Google ? And they didn't. So again, if you are moving on to either one of these platforms, if that small test case scenario shows you anything, it is that both of these communities do not have the level of anger or cynicism that once upon a time people would have worried that tech warriors on the internet that guardrail their platforms may come at them hard. It really isn't the case, and both of them were just positive experiences from top to bottom. But let's talk about the old Wonga. Here we are, we got to it. Let's be honest, TrueNAS is free. Well, is it? Well, it is. It's free if you want to get on board with the community edition there. You will have to do a lot of the work yourself, and you will have to perhaps rely, again, on the community, rely on online guides, rely on knobbers on the internet, or use your AI LLM of choice to help you get it over the line. And with UnRAID, it is pretty much the same. But you have to pay. It starts with a 30-day free trial, and from there you can either get a starter, annual or lifetime license, starting at $59 and ending at $249 on that spectrum there. Now, none of these provide you with expedited support. They don't give you anything extra. It is still the same software, and that money going into development of that software. Now, we have two ways of looking at this. One, what exactly is UnRAID bringing to the table to justify that money, or what exactly is TrueNAS doing to remain sustainable, given that it's not charging anything? So let's go with TrueNAS first. TrueNAS has an enterprise platform. The enterprise platform, which has a number of bells and whistles and services, from high availability to flash optimized services and abilities that are either limited to or heavily expanded upon their enterprise tier. The enterprise tier, by the way, also does have a level of support that is not afforded to the community edition there. That ultimately pays for everything else. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, they do have, or at least are in partnership with, an organization who are working on a much more easy, chewable gateway onto the TrueNAS platform, and it is known as HexOS.
I'm in danger!
HexOS arrives currently at $199 and eventually will be $299 at full release. And it is trying to be a chewable, easy way to manage a TrueNAS server, but still enjoy the benefits of TrueNAS, ZFS stuff, all there running in the background. They're not there yet. They've been in development for quite a long time, and it is a long road ahead, with some raising doubts about whether they're going to achieve this lofty goal. I'm still hopeful, but I'll be honest, my hopes are starting to dwindle ever so slightly. But between these two, and they, again, although it is HexOS that is producing this, certainly there is obvious equity or revenue share with TrueNAS there, with the money being drawn in, with the enterprise side of things also bringing in revenue. That's pretty much how TrueNAS has the middle ground, with the community supporting it remaining free. Now, in the case of UnRAID, UnRAID survives pretty much exclusively on that licensing there, early daughter, that $49 starter up to $249 lifetime there. Although it does have partnerships with some hardware vendors, and TrueNAS does have IX Systems pre-built NAS solutions. UnRAID partnering recently with 45 Drives, but also with some other NAS brands in the past, providing their licenses. I think the most recent one was LinkStation with their N1, N2 systems and more. It survives solely on that money. What does it put that money into? Largely into evolving their platform overall, integrating a lot of newer disciplines in storage technology into their very distinct drive mixing service options that it provides. Alongside that, optimizing system management, optimizing a lot of user experience, introducing some of those wizards that I mentioned earlier on, as well as maintaining a lot of the community applications and paying developers throughout the way. So that money is going towards something that is a great deal more nebulous than the far more clear lines that are being presented there, at least in terms of TrueNAS Enterprise, slightly less so with HexOS. Now, I mentioned drive mixing there. It is worth highlighting that alongside this, TrueNAS is working on the means to mix and match drives within a single RAID area, something you can do with a performance penalty on UnRAID. On the ZFS side of things with TrueNAS, currently, although ZFS expansions are now mostly a thing, mixed drive RAID pools really isn't, unless you go for cluster RAIDs with mixed RAIDs all within one larger storage area. But alongside that, a lot of that development on the ZFS, so the TrueNAS side of things, a lot of that money does continue to go a little bit more into the enterprise side of things than it does into the day-to-day side of things. Alongside that, and alongside that paid enterprise platform, there's now also something called Connect Plus, which allows for remote monitoring of up to 3 TrueNAS systems, or 1 petabyte. And again, that's around $60 a year. And a lot of this money going into the development, the UX design, and of course the engineers there in the background, all the time improving on those storage integrations. So ultimately, the money you're paying for the software is also paying it forward to keep the software up to date, secure, and ever evolving into the future. So yes, if you don't want to spend money now, TrueNAS will de facto be the best option for you. But keep in mind that some of the best features of TrueNAS down the road may well end up on the more enterprisey platform, or at the very least their better versions. We've seen no evidence of grandfathering, and I don't think they would go down that road. It would completely destroy the community. But They are a business, and if they are carrying the weight of countless users who are not paying, eventually the bottom line is going to make them have to look at those numbers and think, well, where is the best served pathway for our innovations to be? And UnRAID doesn't have that complex choice to make because very early doors they've gone with that paid option. It's also worth highlighting that neither one of these platforms is now truly open source. UnRAID, by its very nature in 2026 as it is not an open source product, with a lot of the work happening there in the background, obviously for commercial and proprietary IP reasons. But TrueNAS, for the longest time its builds were completely public, have started rescinding a lot of that and removing a lot of the public build methodology they have had because they are a commercial product in the end. Whether you are paying for it or not, they are still the platform there at the top that has to think about the bottom line. And a big part of that has been caused by a lot of brands out there that have been running their NAS operating systems that are built on TrueNAS or rolling out with TrueNAS and selling their solutions. Looking at you, Harbour Innovations, who are rolling out solutions that have got TrueNAS in one shape or form on board, restickered, relabeled on the top, and TrueNAS, IX systems, call them what you will, seeing not a penny of that. So they've had to lock a lot of that behind closed doors. So neither one of these is what we would classically call open source, although I would argue TrueNAS is a little bit more open source than UnRAID. But if that matters to you, that's the way it is in 2026. And if you come from Turnkey where nothing is open source, this probably isn't going to be a deal breaker for you. The reality simply is, for a Turnkey NAS solution user, that the easiest pathway is UnRAID. And if ease is what matters to you, UnRAID would be the better choice. It doesn't make it as easy as Turnkey. Frankly, neither of these platforms will ever be as straightforward as Turnkey. But that is sort of the point, because you just can't have both pathways. You just can't. Unless they stick some nightmare AI LLM on the front that interprets your commands to build the system, and there must be temptations in the back end of both of these brands to integrate that. Their communities would be in uproar about that, allowing some remote access LLM to get the job done. So if you are looking for ease, UnRAID is the easier choice of the two. But keep in mind, TrueNAS is complex for a reason. It is complicated because of the sheer depth of its abilities and scalability. UnRAID has a lot of that. It has scalability, the scale out of the storage, and there is a reason they partnered with 45 drives for the Signature series. They have, they have magic there to get that job done. But for a more integrated ZFS experience, and if ZFS is what you are moving away from Turnkey to enjoy to its fullest extent, TrueNAS will likely be the option for you. But if that doesn't interest you, you are looking for an easy life, UnRAID will be very appealing to you. Just keep in mind that early gateway for the price point. I should have said at the beginning, neither one of these brands is sponsoring this video. This video, like all the others we've done here on the channel, has been 1, about problem solving, 2, because we like doing it, and 3, because people ask for it. If you are someone that clicked like, clicked subscribe, or just watched, thank you so much for helping us get over the line to 200,000 subscribers here at NAS Compares. Me and Ed are genuinely going to be eternally grateful to you. If you're someone that's subscribed and supported us on Ko-Fi, Patreon, or YouTube members, you have really helped us out in the last 12 to 24 months. YouTube is hard, and covering a niche subject as network attached storage, trust me, when it comes to the whole area of IT, those that are into data are so far outside the niche, it is unreal. It is both the most important and the most overlooked part of home labbing, I would argue there. Where are the logs kept? Where's the data going to be accessed, and is it secure? Still, nonetheless, thank you to all of you that have supported me and Ed here at NAS Compares in what we are trying to build here. And we genuinely, as I say, will be eternally grateful to you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at 300k subs.